of the Santa Barbara Local Agency Formation Commission. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Freeman.
Here.
Commissioner Geyer. Here. Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Commissioner Kiriakou. Commissioner Magana. Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Osborne.
Here.
Commissioner Patino. Commissioner Richardson.
Here.
Commissioner Stark.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
Let the record reflect that Commissioner Kiriakou, Commissioner Magana, and Commissioner Patino are absent.
If you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. The next item of business is the approval of minutes from the October 10th, 2024 meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Hartman, second by Stark. Do we take public comment on this kind of? Is there public comment?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Oh,
Aye.
no, it's right, because yes, okay, so roll call vote.
Actually, Chair Freeman,
Yes.
I'm not a voting member at this point. I'm just an alternate, so I don't know if that makes a difference.
Oh, okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Okay, moving on to public comment. Now is the time for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on items not on the agenda?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak.
That concludes public comment. Moving on to the approval of the consent calendar. Are there any items that people would like to pull?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Geyer, second by Hartman. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right, moving on to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to business item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, business item number 1 is to receive an oral staff report and agendize for December 12, 2024, consideration of municipal service review for special districts that provide parks and recreation, open space, library, and facility rental services.
Thank you. Executive Officer to report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commission. So this year's service review covers 18 agencies that provide these types of services, and today we're releasing this document that covers the parks, open space, rec, library, facility rentals, MSR, for a minimum 30-day public comment period review. What you'll find is 450 pages of interesting information about the services that all these agencies provide. But some of the key findings that we pulled out of the report, I just wanted to summarize in the staff report, which is about 89% of the population that live within the county reside within one of these 18 districts that provide these types of services. So it's a good source of a chunk of population base. At the conclusion of the report, the recommendation is simply to reaffirm the spheres of influence for 8 of the agencies. And so at the completion of this service review, their service review will be fully completed, and we can adopt their spheres of influence. For the balance of those agencies, we still have one more report to write, and that'll be the final concluding service review that we write for all of our agencies. The report has identified, interesting enough, 69,000 acres of land that's in conservation or conservation easements or in sort of private easements. 630,000 acres are in either federal Los Padres National Forest, 95,000 acres are in some other federal land, and then there's 102,000 acres part of the Vandenberg Space Force Base. 15,000 acres are in state lands. So there's a large swath of lands in big chunks that are in these sort of protected areas. In total, when you just sort of narrow it down to kind of public and private recreation and open space areas, that totals just over 11,000 acres that become part of the daily use of these population base. The report does acknowledge the efforts that are underway by the county. They have undertaken a countywide recreation master plan. And so they're still working on that, but we were able to tap into some of that resource and some of the data finding that they were able to do and kind of incorporate it into some of this reporting as well. So you'll see some of that early spill of that, but we don't want to steal any thunder by those staff that are working at the county level. But there is work underway. Needless to say that there are some collaborations amongst the city and the counties in trying to make sure that these types of services are coordinated and being met by the needs of the population. Also reports that the county is working with 5 cities, so we'll be amending our report slightly as we found out the city of Crependeria is part of that pool of cities now that we didn't officially report in our MSR, but they are all part of this library service consortium to provide these types of service and help fund so that library services can be provided throughout the county. And then there's various facility rentals throughout that the public can use and rent all throughout. And so there's all kinds of various styles, largely community centers or some auditoriums, things of that nature that allow the public some space that if they have some venues they have access to. Again, the recommendation here is to agendize a public hearing on December 12th. That's at our next meeting, regular scheduled LAFCO meeting, at which time we would consider the full MSR and the spheres of influence for adoption for those 8 agencies. For all 18, we'll be adopting their MSR, and then we will be adopting spheres of influences for 8 of those agencies. And at that point, we will be publishing a notice to send to the paper so that we can properly notice the 21-day notice for that action to take happen on December. And in the meantime, we are here to open it up for the public, take any feedback from commissioners or the public, continue to receive comments on the document, and ultimately produce a final version for the December hearing, at which time we'll prepare, as we did in the previous service reviews, a table of changes. Here's what reflects those changes, red lines, and the commission will have a look at that full document. So with that, if there are any specific questions about this report for this year, we'd be happy to answer any.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions in the commission, beginning with Stark?
I have a couple of small questions and comments. Actually, if at page 10 of your report and somewhere else, there's one reference that I think you should change for the final. That is, you refer to Vandenberg as Vandenberg Air Force Base rather than the Space Force Base. It occurs a couple of times. Probably ought to change that. Second, it's the same place. You note you have introduced me to a term I never heard before. And it was nice that our county is within the California floristic province. I had never known that there is even such a thing as a floristic province. And it's recognized, I guess that's the province, not our county, as one of only 36 biodiversity hotspots on the planet. I didn't know that either. Can you either explain that or come back in December with some sure. Notion of...
I did find that.
I mean, how hot is our spot, I guess, that is really what I want to know.
Through the chair, the commissioner, I'm glad we introduced some new information for you in this space. that catchphrase and that sort of piece of information came from the land trust of all places. So there's a piece of information and resource that we tapped into, was able to glean that out, and I thought that was something of interest and note, so we put it in this report.
Fine. Learn something every day. I have one, actually, it's a substantive question. When you evaluated libraries, it's my understanding that libraries have a couple of distinct functions. One of them is that their buildings serve as sort of a community space that's used by various types of organizations. And another is there's a continuing debate about the extent to which libraries should continue to stock hard copy books as opposed to access online. Does your MSR go into that to any extent, or is that just a policy decision for the individual libraries to deal with?
Yeah, that ultimately becomes a decision in operations for each individual library. So we did not dive into whether or not they should continue to stock hard copy books versus transition to a e-service.
Thanks. I don't know that it's really part of the MSR study, although I understand it's a key issue for libraries in planning for their future operations is the extent to which they need space for their hard copy efforts. Thanks.
You turned your light off now. Hartman? Or?
Well, I would just invite Commissioner Williams to talk about libraries because he chairs the library committee of all the organizations and also was on the ad hoc library committee.
Sounds great to me. If he's, oh, there we go.
Sure. Do you want to just a little? So we've had over the past eight years, the Library Advisory Committee, a number of work to sort of examine why we have the system that we have. Every county has a different system. Every community has a different system. We're unique in that Santa Barbara County funds all libraries, even libraries in cities, which I think is important from the perspective of social equity because generally more poor people live associated with city libraries. So that generally works out good from a social equity standpoint. It doesn't necessarily work out from a everybody sort of pulling the same perspective. So some libraries are much better funded than others because there's other streams of money or because they're Friends of the Libraries is more, has more money or better or is more active than others. Right now the county has libraries, even has a library in Cuyama, which is able to serve that community. But the long-term sustainability of funding of libraries continues to be very much in question. We in the county did do polling to sort of determine the public's willingness to support some kind of dedicated tax because the one library you can pretty much say is sustainable financially in the county is Goleta's, and that's because it has a dedicated tax as well as county funding as well as city funding. So in an effort to sort of emulate that situation, we went out to look at polling. Really didn't look good. But the governance is, is strange. It's by contract. The county as a funder has a contract with the cities that operate in 4 zones. There used to be fewer, but I think a combination of people wanting more local control and people maybe dissatisfied with the administration. Not the county didn't administer it. Remember, we contract with cities to administer it. We don't have our own library staff, even though we're the center of the system. Means that now there's 4 zones. They're not even all on black gold anymore. And it means that we're now paying more for the same level of service. So, but we have more local control. And so some people are more happy with that, but now Carpinteria runs their own library, Goleta runs their library, and Buellton Solving. Santa Maria runs Santa Maria, Orchid, and Los Alamos and Cuyama, and then Vandenberg Village and Lompoc is both by Lompoc, and then Santa Barbara City runs their 2 libraries, and Montecito. Is that was that the good primer that you were looking for?
Yeah, so it's a very awkward system, and its long-term sustainability is a big question mark, but we did a major study, and we still need brick-and-mortar libraries and books as community centers, warming centers, information hubs.
Stark?
No, that's very helpful. As my understanding correctly, Black Gold is the system that allows libraries to exchange assets with each other. Is that right?
That's right. And that also is costing more than it used to, not for any of the reasons why I mentioned, but because of the digital copyright issues. And you know, the governance wasn't sort of something that everybody was into because it was one library, one vote. So obviously some of the larger jurisdictions had a problem with that. So some have pulled out. So there's some other systems now that the Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo library are on.
Kiriako?
Oh, you just turned it off. Just a couple things to add. One is, we were talking about the Goleta Valley Library. I think it's important to mention a couple of things about it. One is it's not closing. It's in the process of being relocated. The city is looking forward to spending quite a bit of money, of its own money, to make sure that we can relocate services to a physical space that can serve the larger community, and if possible, find a way to do so in a way that's more physically accessible to the 2 disadvantaged communities that it serves, Isla Vista and Old Town Goleta. So I want to bring that up. If you've read in the newspapers, you might believe that the Goleta Valley Library is closing. For 2 years. For 2 years, which is, it's not. That physical location will be reconstructed. The gift that the county gave the city of that building is an older building. It needed some love. The love is coming, but it's going to take some time. But the city is going to be relocating the library, not closing the library. The second thing I wanted to mention is I think it's important to kind of address part of that point, which is if you're going to look at a municipal service review, one of the things that you really need to look at is how does the city and the regional fixed infrastructure help or hinder the provision of those services? The existence of the 217, the existence of the 101 really bifurcates and separates disadvantaged communities from their physical library and makes accessibility to those services a challenge. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to address, not only through this process, but the provision of bookmobile services and other things.
And the we in this case is the city of Goleta, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Continuing on the theme of libraries, I have a couple comments and questions about that. So one thing that's come up here a little bit is the notion of these library systems, things like black gold. And my understanding, which might be very wrong, is that one of the, I don't know if it's rules is the right word, that some of, processes and then policies, maybe that's the right word, that some of these systems have is that they require contiguous connections between the different areas that are served within those systems. The reason why I'm looking at that is I know that the zones that the county administrates are kind of just an administrative issue within the county. And so I'm presuming that LAFCO doesn't really have much say over anything relating to the boundaries of those things. But I don't know if, because of the effects that those boundaries end up having on the services being provided by the cities and special districts that are within those zones, and particularly one that I'm thinking of is an issue relating to Carpinteria, is whether there's any opinions that are going to be provided, because as you said, you were going to be looking and making some edits on that going potentially over the next month. Opinions being provided in our MSR relating to how those zones end up getting organized?
That's a good question and well-deserved thought that needs to go into all of that. I think the approach that we have taken generally for this first round of 5 series of MSRs is to be a little bit more light-handed in our recommendations to make changes. It was more of a sense of getting where are we at this point in time with these types of services. What's the snapshot look like? Get a baseline. As we roll into the next set of series, we will be building on each of those service reviews. So we now have a good baseline report of what exists, how was it done, and I think the next set of series is a bit more LAFCO interest in seeing how can things get better. So the answer is, in short, I think for this particular report, we're probably going to be a little light on recommendations and changes to any of the processes through all of these service reviews. And it was really the next set of series that when we get into, now that we have a better understanding of what's out there, what has been out there on the ground, and everybody's lived with it for a 5-year cycle, what have we done differently in the next 5 years or the last 5 years? Or what should we start focusing on for the next upcoming 5 years is the approach that I think we wanted to take.
Thank you so much. And then the other question is not as much recommendation oriented, but more just status of existing discussions oriented. I have some memory that in the past there's been thoughts that the county might try to help organize a joint powers authority as a way of dealing with libraries. I don't know if that's something that is being discussed and is something that would be, because that would be LAFCO relevant if something like that were to end up occurring, or?
Yeah, if that was coming to fruition, we would have documented that's
I'm not saying it's
part of it.
happening right now, but I'm wondering, is that even something that's like?
Yeah, so our knowledge that JPA isn't close to being formed yet, or maybe still in talks.
That has been discussed, but as maybe an option under a funding effort. There's probably not a whole lot of value to have a joint powers unless there's money associated with the joint powers, because otherwise you're sort of, I would just critique that the largest problem with library policy is that what it has consisted of in the last 12 years has been largely fighting over diminishing resources, not diminishing in real terms, but diminishing in purchasing power terms. Starting with the loss of state funding, and then sort of continuing into the structure that we have now, and there are systems that have more services, but they have more funding out there. We did a real good primer as part of our work of what other systems have in terms of just basic things like meeting rooms, programs, books, electronic resources. And it was pretty clear that while we have a lot of chaos and a lot of fighting, okay, that's one problem. The real issue is we just have less money than these other systems.
Stark, your light is on?
Oh.
Oh, okay.
One by accident was listening and hit the light.
Okay, Kyriako.
Just one thing, I think everything that was just said to my right is true, but I think there's a both and I think the and is when you live in a world of diminishing resources and increasing competition, communication, kind of interpersonal relationships can become really important. And I think there have been times where perhaps jurisdictions ended up going it alone, and maybe there was an assumption that that would lead to there being more resources for them. Regardless of whether or not that turned out to be true, the notion of local control and being able to establish hours, set hours, is a really powerful thing. Some of the agencies that contracted out and then took over services themselves, they were dealing with things like suddenly finding out the library is going to be closed one day a week, and you find out in a press release. Like, those kinds of things would happen. And so I think the relationships between the contractors and the customers has also been an issue at times in the past. I think there's been a lot of headway made in that regard. I think the libraries do a much better job of talking to each other and talking to their customers than perhaps was true a decade ago. But I do agree that's largely an issue of resource allocation and resource equity.
All right. I don't know if
Commissioner Freeman?
I was about to ask. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. It's Commissioner Nelson, and just for the record, Commissioner Patino is now present as well, so I don't know if that is helpful for the clerk, the points of voting. My question was for Mr. Prather. I was looking at the different sections there where it has opportunities and challenges. And there's a subsection there on regional collaboration, and many of them basically say currently does not require collaboration. What is the mechanism within LAFCO where collaboration is something that's either required, or what is that possible that might change in the future for an area?
Commissioner Nelson, through the chair, yes. So in short answer, yes. I think as we understand these service reviews and get deeper involved year after year, LAFCO can begin to start making recommendations on what kind of collaborations and coordinations we think are advantageous for that particular service. And that's what I expect we will get into in the next round of series of these service reviews on all topics. I think we're going to take a little heavier lift at what we think from a commissioner's standpoint and start making recommendations to these agencies about where we think they should be heading in the future.
And I guess it goes along with that question. So I'm just trying to figure out how that would exactly work on collaboration. So would potentially be part of maybe a sphere of influence or a LAFCO policy that if there's an application that there first needs to be some type of regional collaboration in advance?
Yeah, I think ultimately what that ties to is any future action that the commission has to take for an agency can be contingent upon whether or not they performed the recommended actions throughout their service review. So if we ask that they prepare a certain plan or reach out and try to coordinate, and that they fall short of that, and in whatever time frame they are before this commission asking for an annexation or a sphere of influence, that's a factor to be considered in that particular request on are they performing, are they meeting expectations on other aspects that we've outlined in our service reviews. And the commission can use that as a piece of information to decide if amending their sphere or annexing territory into their district is appropriate based on the lack of commitment that they may be making otherwise.
So under some annexation applications, collaboration might be required in advance. Is that something that exists now, or is that something that you're saying that might exist in the future?
That would likely be something in the future, because we don't have that as a recommendation or a condition of any approval for spheres. And so that comes with that of eventual future action that the commission wants to take. And you can hang any kind of terms and conditions that are appropriate on spheres of influence for a given district. And at that time, if they don't perform to the expectations of the commission, that's one piece of information amongst a cluster of information pieces that's presented to the commission for you to help make a decision on the specific action that would be before you. Say it be an annexation, you can say, we asked that something happen in our service review, that didn't happen. That gives you pause as to whether or not you want to take a formal action for an annexation. So that's the type of decision-making power that you have. As I indicated, with this first year of service review rounds, we weren't going into that depth of condition-making, but we are just sort of getting a sense of the ground of how it all exists. And certainly this conversation is pertinent, and it puts those agencies on notice about what types of things the commission is thinking about, so that when we get to that next 5-year round and we're starting to look at libraries again, has anything changed? Has progress been made? We'll report that on a basis, and if it's status quo, LAFCO may want to start putting some conditioning authority on our spheres of influence for these special districts and cities, and say, we want to see these types of expectations when we get to the next sphere of influence.
So why wouldn't we start to put that on sphere of influences now? I mean, I think collaboration is definitely something that is a spirit that I think we're all striving for. And, it's been my observation that some of these decisions get made without collaboration. And so, it seems that it would go well for LAFCO and for the county as a whole to start to embed collaboration requirements and the spheres of influences now and not in 5 years, because I think in 5 years, that just leads to potentially further dysfunction. So anyways, just want to bring that up as a point. I think collaboration is great, something that I strive for, that I ask for, and don't always have it reciprocated. I hope I can in the future, and hopefully that's something we could add into these spheres of influences through these MSRs, whether it's for library services or anything else. I just think that is paramount to good planning and good governance. Thank you.
Any public comment on this agenda item?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. Anyone like to make some motion to accept this, or
Motion to set a hearing for December 12th.
set the hearing? Okay.
I'll be happy to make the motion. May I inquire as to whether we make the CEQA determination at this time or when we have the hearing?
At the hearing.
Hartman seconds.
Motion by Stark, second by Hartman. Is Patino acting as a voting member? Okay. Moving on to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams, Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Next item is business item number 2. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Business item number 2 is to authorize the process for selecting a regular and alternate public member to serve on LAFCO and appoint an ad hoc committee.
Executive Officer to report.
Thank you. So this item is to select the public member process and start and initiate that. The 4-year term seats for both our regular member and alternate member are coming due in March of 2025. And generally, 3 years ago, when we started this process, we sort of, Commission gave direction to allow a sort of a formal public review process, announcement in papers, and try to solicit a broad interest of available applicants to this position. And so we've outlined that process. And we're using that similar process that we used 3 years ago when we made the current appointments. And so this allows us to essentially kind of start this process in November, allows time for applicants to apply for this process, allows an ad hoc committee to be formed, hold initial interview interim step, and then come back before the full commission to make your proper selection and appointment. Let's see, as I indicated, the final interview and full commission would be in January, most likely, with the opportunity, if you wanted to, continue that matter for another month into February before the formal start of the March term is up. This year, the recommendation that I made was to stagger the regular and the alternate positions. So normally they were running concurrently 4 years. I felt if we staggered the alternate position by 2 years this initial time, and then hereafter everything would be a 4-year term, we could align such that the alternate and public member could be alternating, just like the alternating positions of our special districts and our city members as well. And that would essentially allow members that are interested to kind of hold an alternate seat and then be able to apply for a regular seat when it comes due, and not necessarily have to lose their seat in rotation or position if the commission deems them fit to move up to a regular member. So that can be fully discussed. You can continue to allow it as a 4-year term, or take my recommendation on a one-time only 2-year for the alternate approach. Either way works for staff. We will simply take direction from the commission on this matter. We'll start the public notice period as indicated in our attachment in the staff report. If need be, we'll amend that language to see fit as the discussion moves forward. And then we hope to schedule an ad hoc interview meeting in December. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Any comments, questions from the commission? Kyriako.
Not a question, just a comment. I'd be happy to serve on the ad hoc when we get to that point.
Okay.
I like the idea of doing ad hoc.
Are there any other people who would like to throw their names in? Looking at Geyer.
Yeah, I'd like to serve on the ad hoc committee too.
And Stark? Was,
I just have a very simple question. I understand that the public member can't vote on the public member. Can the public member vote on this motion to approve the process or not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So far, we have interest on this being on this committee from Kyriako and from Geyer. How many people are we doing? 3 people we're looking for? Or?
Generally 3. It takes the actual selection of a public member takes 1 from each category. So when we get to January, whoever is selected as the public member has to receive a vote from a county, a city, and a special district member in order to be fully approved as a public member. So 1 more ad hoc committee from a county member would be acceptable as well.
But do we need to have all 3 categories on the committee?
We do not have to have all 3 on the ad hoc committee.
Okay. Out of
Chair Freeman?
curiosity, though, does anyone from the county want to be on this committee?
I'm willing
Chair
to
Freeman, I
do.
have a question.
Yes.
I just was curious on what comes out of the ad hoc. Is it actually a recommendation, or is it just a vetting of a couple candidates? Just trying to understand what the end product is going to be for us as a commission from the ad hoc committee.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson, through the chair, it would be a recommendation from the ad hoc committee.
Okay. I'm willing as well, although, I'm just an alternate. I understand that Commissioner Hartman is the regular member, so I definitely defer to her, but if that wasn't an option, I'd be happy to step in her stead.
Is there any issue with an alternate being on the committee?
No issue with an alternate being on the ad hoc committee.
Great.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, we seem to now have 3 people who are interested in doing it, and it seems to form a reasonable committee, unless anyone has any objections to this. Okay. Is there any public comment on this motion? No, it's a motion on this agenda item.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Okay. Do you need 2 motions, maybe 1 to form the committee and 1 to approve the process, or?
Yeah, I think that would be good to have 2 separate
Okay.
motions on who's on the ad hoc and the process.
Okay.
I'll move the creation of the ad hoc and the appointment of Kyriako, Nelson, and Geyer.
Second?
Motion by Kyriako, second by Hartman. And is roll call vote?
Commissioner Geyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kyriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Abstain.
Commissioner Williams, Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. And then is anyone interested in making a motion on the process? Or is there any discussion that we failed to have on the process?
I have a question about this. My understanding is the initial term of the public alternate would be for a term of 2 years. Is that correct?
Correct, correct.
Is it the intention that thereafter, all terms, including alternate terms, would be for a 4-year term, or is it the alternate perpetually going to serve 2-year terms? I just want to know what your intention was.
Thereafter, all terms will go to a 4-year term,
So this is a one-time deal for the first 2 years.
just to get them offset, and then we'll start the 4-year terms.
So that the terms don't both end at the same time. Is that the concept?
Correct.
Thank you.
I guess out of curiosity, I think one of the reasons maybe why it had been kind of overlapping was to allow for an opportunity for the alternate to promote to the full position, or is that something that can happen anyway, I guess, because it would just cause a big, yeah, so that's not a point for you. All right, so does anyone have a motion on this process aspect?
I'll move our executive officer's recommendation.
I'll second it.
Motion by Hartman, second by Guyer. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Moving on to information item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, information item number 1 is to receive and file a report on pending Santa Barbara LAFCO applications. File number 24-05 for the Sphere of Influence Amendment and annexation to the Goleta Sanitary District of the property located at 700 Via Tranquila in the unincorporated area of Santa Barbara County, as well as file number 24-06 and 24-07 for the out-of-agency service agreement, Sphere of Influence Amendment, and annexation to Goleta Sanitary District of the property located at 840 Puente Drive in the unincorporated area of Santa Barbara County.
Thank you. Executive Officer to report.
Great. Thank you, Chair and Commission. So this is the announcement of 2 new applications that were submitted by, on behalf of the property owners through a petition process. So this is our announcement that that application has been received and is in process, both for annexation and sphere amendments into the Goleta Sanitation District, with the caveat for the Fuente Drive to also include an out-of-agency service agreement due to the urgency need for them to get a connection.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the commission?
So we're not actually required to do anything except accept this, is that correct?
Are we even required to accept it, or we just heard it?
It's a receive the file that applications have been in. This also sets the 60-day clock for the Goleta Sanitation District to provide any written comments before we take it to a hearing.
Okay. Seeing none, is there any public comment on this not on this agenda item?
We have no request to speak on this item.
Okay. With no motion needed, moving on to, now moving on to commissioner announcements. Do we have any commissioner announcements or any requests for future agenda items? Stark.
I have a short report from the LAFCO conference, if this is the appropriate time. Let me get my notes. I actually have notes. I have one takeaway from the LAFCO conference, besides the fact it was a very enjoyable networking experience and learned some good things. And the takeaway comes from the County Coastal Counties Caucus. The County Coastal Counties Caucus. And there is a spirited discussion, and I think a consensus is that in order for LAFCOs, generally speaking, to have any sort of traction in the legislature should the need arise, and you never know when the need is going to arise, it is materially advantageous for us to be collaborative and cooperative with respect to this effort. And secondly, is that, frankly, because LAFCO doesn't have very much money available to lobby on their behalf, the most effective way of getting any traction in the legislature is by personal appearances by public officials. This is materially advantaged the closer you are to Sacramento. It's not that easy for us to do it. So it was interesting that one member of our Coastal Counties Coalition, I believe a supervisor from Solano County, was quite vocal in his expression of that particular principle and his willingness to serve as a volunteer face should the need arise. A related thing was there was some support for the creation of Coastal Counties listserv or some other way of communicating between the various coastal counties on matters that are particular to the coast, notably ag preservation and coastal issues. We've got actually have an ocean that we need to worry about. And it seemed to me that that's a very prudent concept, is that collaboration and establishment of a probably long-term generating network of getting our voice heard a little bit better in Sacramento is a good idea. And I would like to request that our EO communicate with, I guess we have there's a key EO for the coastal counties. The gentleman from Santa Cruz, is it? The gentleman from Santa Cruz, and possibly with our newly elected LAFCO representative, well, I believe it is Ms. Chang Karai from San Mateo. She's a district member from San Mateo, as well as possibly Supervisor Mashburn, I think the gentleman's name is, and look into possibly what it would take to establish some sort of communications network to facilitate this sort of thing. I think would probably be useful in developing opportunities for shared resources, discussing common problems, and maybe building up a little bit of ability to have our voice heard a little bit clearer and more effectively. Other than that, I had a lot of fun riding in that Tesla. It has more screens and things in it. It had no steering wheel, but a lot of moving pictures. Was very entertaining.
Definitely had a steering wheel. That was definitely had a steering wheel.
I just couldn't see it.
All right. Are there any other commissioner announcements? Okay. Moving on to executive officer comments.
All right. Well, eloquently said from Shane, his recap of the LAFCO conference, there are 2 new coastal members, as he indicated, that got appointed and got voted in. So that was going to be my announcement. So I'll just leave it to, in our holiday tradition, we made molasses cookies to start the holiday season, and I brought them. So please take some with you as we adjourn this meeting.
And drop some off up north on your way back, Mike.
All right. And with that, we were now adjourned to Thursday, December 12th at 1 p.m. in Santa Maria.
Lovely.